what we have here is a selection of M111 valve covers, and starting from the right on the end here we have a pre-facelift M111 compressor. In the centre we have a pre-facelift M111 NA, this one's from a C180, and on the end here we have a post-facelift M111 Evo. This one's from a C180, it's naturally aspirated again. Now I will just jump in here as well and state that there is also another style of valve cover that you guys may not be familiar with, and that comes from the earlier M111s, in fact the earliest M111s from the beginning up to 1996 I believe, where the air intake came across the top of the engine and they have a recess and use the metal intake manifolds as standard, and they actually have the coils mounted to the intake manifold rather than under the spark cover. So the similarities you will notice is that the naturally aspirated valve covers both have the breather on the intake side. Again, with the compressor models, both pre-facelift and facelift, the breather is on the exhaust side. This was done purely to make routing into the intake of the supercharger a little bit easier for recirculating. This obviously dragged some oil with it in the process, and that's what inevitably ruins the MAF sensors on M111 compressor cars. So why is it a problem to run with the original one? Well, it's not. That one works absolutely fine, but when you come to do turbo conversions or you just want to tidy up the engine bay a bit, declutter, we find that it looks much more aesthetically pleasing to have the breather port on the intake side, leaving the turbo to just sort of float in its own space, and just looks relatively tidy in that respect. So the principle is the same whether it's facelift or pre-facelift. So your facelift compressor is done exactly the same as the pre-facelift. So you switch to an NA1, you get your breather on the intake side. So I only recommend swapping, so if you've got a M111 Evo compressor, use an M111 Evo NA valve cover. If you've got a pre-facelift M111 compressor, use a pre-facelift M111 NA valve cover. Technically the two are interchangeable, but the main difference is Mercedes did move the camshaft position sensor. So on the standard pre-facelift M111 engines it is located around here. On the post-facelift M111 Evo engines it is located here. So what about the spark covers? What are the differences between the spark covers, or as some people call them, the HT covers? Technically they are called a HT cover, I just for some reason call them spark covers. Called HT cover because they cover the high tension components. So there are some subtle differences between the spark covers that you wouldn't immediately notice straight off the bat. Now the main difference is because the Evo engine uses a coil on plug design with fully sequential spark, and the pre-Evo uses a wasted spark 2 coil for 4 cylinders setup. Also the pre-VVTi M111 actually had just HT leads. There were no coils under these covers, it was just HT leads and spark plugs, and the coils were actually mounted to the metal intake manifold. So those metal intake manifolds that we like to use, they actually have a bracket underneath for the coils to mount to. Obviously we don't use them because we use coil on plug and Volkswagen coils on our builds. So let's get into it a bit. So the difference isn't immediately noticeable really, but because of that change between coil on plug and the wasted spark 2 coil setup. These two might look the same pretty much, other than that corner being cut off, but that centre bolt hole actually had to move because of the location of where one of the bodies for the coils ended up. So they moved it over slightly, and that inevitably meant that made these non-interchangeable. And also you've got this little corner cut off, which means although it sits on there, it doesn't look right. So it's a simple, subtle change that you don't notice unless you're really looking for it, or you go to fit one of them to one of these covers. However, if you have a compressor engine that you're converting to turbo and you want a valve cover that doesn't say compressor, so you want one of the smooth covers, you can interchange the NA and compressor valve covers, spark covers. Keep going, I don't know what. You can interchange the HT covers. So these are identical. They will swap between each other quite happily. That is only because they're both pre-Evo, pre-facelift. So if you're trying to swap out your HT cover, facelift, stick with facelift parts, pre-facelift, stick with pre-facelift parts, except if you have a pre-VVTi M111. They have like a dip in the valve cover. I wish I had one. I did have one years ago. They have a dip in the valve cover where the intake pipe actually goes across the top of the engine and into the metal intake manifold. Because of that, you can't interchange these. Now, I'm not sure whether they have the same bolt pattern even. It wouldn't surprise me if they were different. But I think the pre-facelift, this style valve cover will fit on the earliest M111s. Don't quote me on that, I could be wrong. So, in short, these are all interchangeable, but there's absolutely no point fitting that to a pre-facelift M111. Stick with pre-facelift to pre-facelift, facelift to facelift. Don't overcomplicate things. The parts are available for both. Then just stick with that series engine with those series parts. It makes life so much easier. So that said, I hope you guys are enjoying the explanation videos. I know they can go on a bit, but I spend hours sometimes replying to comments, both on YouTube and on the forums, and sometimes it's just a bit easier to put it into a video. They drag on a bit, but the only thing I'm trying to do is to help you guys and help the Mercedes community. I see no benefit to this other than that I'm helping the community. And sometimes I babble on a bit, sometimes I get things wrong. I'm not right all the time, I'm learning as well, but I'm trying to share what I am learning. And I hope you guys can appreciate it, because the channel isn't monetized. You may see adverts on some of my videos, but I don't see anything for that. All this is done in my spare time for fun, because I enjoy working on Mercedes cars and engines. So that said, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, share, it all helps, and I'll see you in the next one.